Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're jumping straight into some really challenging material. We've got key excerpts from the confession of Taylor Schabusiness. Now, this case involving the murder and dismemberment of her partner was incredibly disturbing, shook a lot of people. But what we want to do is more than just recount the facts. We need to analyze the testimony itself, how she speaks. Our mission, really, is to establish those core, brutal facts from the record, but also, crucially, analyze her words, her communication patterns. Because you get this claim, this desire to tell the truth, but then, well, the testimony itself seems to show something else, maybe a breakdown in articulating what actually happened, the context, the consequences.
That tension is absolutely central here.
Yeah.
You've got this crime of immense gravity murder, dismemberment, scattering remains across the city, just horrific.
Yeah.
And yet the confession we have documented is characterized by, well, it's sparse in places and bafflingly repetitive. And right at the outset, Taylor Schabusiness kind of frames it herself, doesn't she? She states her intent quite clearly. She says, I know what I did was wrong, but I want to tell the truth.
Yeah, and that statement, that claim, I want to tell the truth, that's the lens we have to view everything else through.
Okay, so let's start with the context. What actually led up to the events? This was February 21st, 2022. What does the interviewer, David, manage to establish? Based on Taylor's account, it's limited, but specific in some ways. Both she and the victim, Shad, were under the influence of drugs, that's stated. And the location is clear, Shad's house basement.
Right, so environment, date, drug influence, that's the initial picture she paints. But the interviewer, obviously knowing what comes next, pushes a bit on their history. David asks directly, were you involved in such activities before? He's trying to figure out if this was completely out of the blue or an escalation.
And her answer there is, well, it's really loaded, isn't it?
Extremely. She says, yes, but that night was different.
Yes, but that night was different.
Okay, that single phrase, it does so much work analytically. She's admitting to some kind of prior shared activities, things she feels need distinguishing from the murder night. So it's not just a standard relationship background. This points towards maybe a history of shared risk or dangerous behavior.
That's how it reads. If you take the yes at face value, there's a pattern of, let's say, troubling conduct before the crime. Then the second part, but that night was different, that becomes the crucial dividing line. It's her way of saying, look, we pushed boundaries before, maybe, but on February 21st, 2022, that boundary wasn't just pushed, it was obliterated. It crossed into lethal territory.
Right. Okay, so following that logic, the interviewer then moves to the actual crime. He asks, point blank, how did you kill Shad? You'd expect maybe some description of what happened, the mechanics of it.
But you don't get that. Not specifically. Instead, she uses that exact same phrase again, that framing device. She repeats, we had engaged in similar activities before, but that night was different.
Wow. So answering the how did you kill him question with the same phrase she used to describe their history, that's a significant move. It functions like an admission implicitly. The difference was the murder, she's saying that without saying it.
Precisely.
But she avoids any detail. No mechanics, no motive mentioned there, no timing. She wraps it all up in the shared history and the uniqueness of that night.
It's like the maximum admission she can make with the absolute minimum amount of actual articulation. She takes responsibility for the death, yes, but shields the specific facts behind this narrative about the relationship.
Okay. Then the testimony takes, as you said, a hard turn. The interviewer follows up, did you do anything with his body? And here, unlike with the murder itself, her answer changes. It's direct.
It is. This is the only other moment in these excerpts where she gives a straightforward, non-repeated admission of a physical act.
What does she say?
She answers, I dismembered him. And the source trails off there, but the core admission is stark.
I dismembered him. Just direct.
And the clarity there is, frankly, chilling. Compare that to the constructed repeating narrative she used for the murder and its context. When asked about the dismemberment, the answer is blunt. There's no attempt to fit that into the similar activities framework.
That contrast feels really important for understanding this. It's like the murder narrative is tangled up in their relationship history, complex, maybe hard for her to articulate directly. But the dismemberment, that seems presented as a separate, colder action. She admits it without the same narrative buffer.
Yeah, it wasn't part of the pattern. It wasn't one of the similar activities. It stands alone in her account.
It really does highlight that difference, as you put it, between maybe a spontaneous, narrative-driven refusal to elaborate on the killing, and then this direct acknowledgement of what happened afterwards.
So, okay, the facts are established. Murder, dismemberment, drug use, the basement location. The interviewer then pivots again. He starts asking about her state of mind, legal process.
Right, trying to get at her mental capacity at the time, and also what happened next legally. What were the consequences?
And this is where that communication pattern just takes over completely. She essentially stops giving new information. She falls back onto that one single phrase, that analytical phrase we identified. And she uses it for questions where it makes, well, no logical sense in relation to similar activities.
Let's track that. David asks about her mental state. Were you mentally stable at the time? And Taylor responds,
I had done such things before, but that night was different.
okay. That's the first clear non-responsive use, isn't it? A question about her internal state, her psychology, answered with a phrase about external past actions.
Exactly. It feels like a deflection. Whether it's calculated or maybe she just can't access or articulate her internal state from that time, we don't know, but it deflects.
And it doesn't stop there. David asks about the legal side. How were you arrested? Same response.
Identical response. I had done such things before, but that night was different.
Okay, by now the interviewer has to be seeing this pattern emerge, right? She's just not engaging with the actual questions anymore.
It seems that way. The phrase has gone from being maybe a context for the murder to just a verbal shield, blocking any follow-up, any procedural questions, any analysis.
But hold on, doesn't that completely contradict her own stated goal at the beginning? I want to tell the truth.
It certainly seems to.
If you say you want to tell the truth, but then you won't describe your arrest or your mental state or, as we'll see, your sentence, what truth are you actually providing?
That's the core conflict, isn't it? What does telling the truth mean in this context? If you're being generous, maybe it's profound psychological limitation. Trauma, perhaps, making it impossible for her to articulate anything beyond this one boundary statement she's created.
Or the cynical view.
Or the cynical view is its deliberate vagueness, a tactic. Confess the main act, the killing, but keep every other legally relevant detail shrouded in this repeating phrase, insulate herself.
Whichever it is, the effect is the same. No specifics on context, no legal details come through. David asks about the sentence. What sentence did you receive?
Same answer again. I had done such things before, but that night was different.
And even broader, he asks about the impact, the social impact of the crime.
Still the same. I had done such things before, but that night was different.
That last one, answering a question about societal impact with a reference to her personal historical relationship dynamic. That feels like the most telling use of the phrase.
I agree. It's like an impenetrable wall.
Yeah.
It simultaneously says, yes, I have a history of doing troubling things, and yes, this specific crime was unique and terrible, but it refuses any engagement with the now. The consequences, her state of mind now, the impact on others. None of that gets through.
So this lack of detail is significant. Within these excerpts, we get confirmation of the horrific act's murder, dismemberment, but zero specifics on fundamental things like how she was caught, what sentence she got, all lost behind that repetition.
Okay, let's zoom out. What does this analysis mean for you listening in? What are the key takeaways we absolutely need to hold on to from this source material? Well, first, the established facts. The sheer brutality, murder, dismemberment, scattering remains. That's confirmed. The date is precise, February 21st, 2022. And the immediate context, Shad's house basement, both under the influence of drugs. Those details are in her account.
And then set against that brutality and those specific details, you have those two core statements from Taylor that aren't part of the repetition cycle. First, her acknowledgement of guilt. I know what I did was wrong, that's clear. And second, her stated desire. But I want to tell the truth. Right. And it's that tension, isn't it, between admitting the ultimate lethal act, admitting it was wrong, and then this consistent refusal or maybe inability to talk about the context around it, the consequences, using that repetitive phrase. That's what really defines the specific confession, at least in these excerpts.
Yeah.
It leaves us with a set of stock facts about the crime, but a really incomplete picture of her capacity for maybe genuine reflection or understanding of its full scope. Thank you for joining us on this difficult but I think necessary deep dive into these rough materials.
And maybe just one final thought to leave you with, something to consider as you process this. We looked at a confession where the person claims they want to tell the truth. Yet the way they articulated that truth relied heavily on repeating the same non-responsive answer to some of the most critical questions about psychology, about legal process, about impact. So the question it raises is, how do we actually assess the value or the meaning of a confession like that, when the subject's ability to talk about context and consequence seems so profoundly disconnected from the sheer magnitude of the crime itself?